According to conventional history, New Zealand is the last major landmass on Earth to be settled by humans. This distant island, located in the southwestern Pacific Ocean, remained uninhabited until the first Polynesians, the Māori, arrived around 1300 AD. However, a remarkable discovery was made on the North Island of New Zealand, one which can completely shatter our established understanding of the region's ancient history. Within the dense vegetation of the Kaimanawa Ranges lies a large megalithic structure known as the Kaimanawa Wall, a formation of stone so precisely fitted together that it has ignited a fervent debate about its origins, challenging our understanding of New Zealand's prehistoric past. The wall itself is characterized by a series of tightly fitted stones which, at first glance, appear to have been placed with precision. The stones are massive, with some estimates suggesting that they weigh several tons each. It was determined that the stones were 330,000 years old and were made of ignimbrite, a volcanic stone made of compressed sand and ash. The nearest outcrop of such stone is 3 miles away or 5 kilometers. This aspect alone has fueled speculation about the level of sophistication required to assemble such a structure, should it have been the work of human hands. Upon closer examination, the arrangement of the stones reveals an almost geometric precision. The stones align in a manner that suggests an intentional pattern, with straight lines and angles that are uncommon in natural rock formations. This peculiar arrangement has led some to propose that the wall could be the remnants of a large megalithic structure, most of which is still unexcavated. In 1996, an investigation into the wall was conducted by archaeologist Barry Brailsford. Brailsford noted that the site was facing precisely due north, which is a pretty remarkable feature that is hardly a coincidence.
There's plenty of strange things about this wall, and one of them is the way it's facing. If you stand with your back to it, you're facing exactly due north. Now, it may be totally insignificant, but there's 360 other points on the compass where it could have been facing.
It's worth noting that many ancient megalithic sites are aligned with the true north, such as the pyramids of Giza, Stonehenge, Chichen Itza, and many others. Brailsford came to the conclusion that the stone blocks of the site were not natural, and they were precisely cut and stacked. The sensational discoveries of Brailsford led to the publication of an article in the New Zealand Listener called Megalith Mystery. Are giant stones in the Kaimanawa Forest Park evidence of an ancient New Zealand culture? In the article, Brailsford made the following statement. There was no doubt that the stones had been cut. The 4 visible stones in the front wall were a uniform 1.6 meters tall and 1 meter wide. In one place, one could insert his arm into a root-ridden cavity and feel the back face and the front face of the next tier. The faces were uncannily smooth, with no saw or adze marks. The interstices where the blocks join were knife blade thin. Further up the hill, the tops of other stones protruded, suggesting a more extensive structure was buried in the hill. The Waitaha are a people often mentioned in discussions about the early human history of New Zealand, but their exact historical context is somewhat controversial and not widely recognized in mainstream academic circles. According to some accounts, particularly those found in certain non-academic sources, the Waitaha were the first wave of settlers in New Zealand. Barry Brailsford is also one of those historians who believe the Waitaha settled New Zealand long before the Māori, so he initially attributed the structure to them. He even talked to some of the Waitaha elders, asking them about the origin of the structure. He was stunned by what they told him.
It's pre-Maori and it's even pre-Waitaha. See, the people who were here before the Māori people as we know them today, the people of Waitaha, the nation of Waitaha. And I brought the elders here. We came at 4 o'clock in the morning and they came from different parts of the island.
The Waitaha elders?
Yes. They came here in the early morning, and they came to this wall and they said, we know these people, but they are way before us.
Curiously, the Māori also stated that this construction was not their doing, as they had never built any megalithic structures. The blocks run for 82 feet or 25 meters in a straight line from east to west.
How can you be so sure that this is man-made?
I mean, the idea that the wall is facing north, the blocks are very uniform. Because the wall is starting to collapse to the west, the blocks are pulling apart from each other. There's spaces in the blocks we can get down and behind them. We can see other blocks that are also uniformly cut and squared behind the blocks that we can see about 9 blocks.
See, a geologist I talked to today said, oh yeah, but there are things like the Giant's Causeway in Ireland, which are natural phenomena. Those big square blocks, it's possible.
Okay, right. Now, that is actually basalt. That's basalt crystals, and as that kind of volcanic core cools, it crystallizes into these 6, 8-sided crystals. In fact, there's a giant city built in Micronesia, 11 square miles, called Nan Madol. It's built out of...
Researcher and writer Brian Forster, who has visited all of the ancient megalithic sites around the world, was also fascinated by the Kaimanawa Wall, and upon visiting it, he noted that the structure is the only stone outcrop in the entire area, and within a 20-mile radius of the site, he didn't discover any other stones. He also noted that the strangely flat stone blocks were fitted in a way very similar to those he examined in Cusco.
What is interesting is it's the only stone outcrop in this entire area. We drove like 20, 30 kilometers into this ancient rainforest, and it's the only stone at all, and it's has strangely flat surfaces and looks like some of the megalithic work that we find in the area of Cusco in Peru.
Cutting massive stone blocks and fitting them together without mortar is an advanced ancient construction technique that is seen not only in Peru, but in other parts of the world, such as Egypt. This indestructible form of polygonal masonry was convergently developed by cultures with no communication, of which none possess sufficient tools to quarry, transport, carve, or place these stones. Many believe these cultures actually inherited these sites and that their true builders were part of a global and technologically advanced ancient civilization that perished at some point in time, possibly due to some sort of cataclysm. Going back to the Kaimanawa Wall, it was also noted that there is a consistent bevel on the upper stones, going all the way to the other side of the structure, and the beveled edges on the rocks are identical.
Close examination reveals behind the first lot of blocks are more layers, separated by a perfect gap. The surface of each block is smooth, as if it's been cut. There are other mysteries too.
In other ancient civilizations, they had a stone which you paid respects to when you came into the site, and everyone apparently has this. And conveniently, here it is.
One of the most indicative discoveries suggesting the structure was man-made was that some of the lower blocks featured precisely cut recesses, allowing them to slide underneath the blocks above, effectively interlocking both sets of blocks. The lower block was probably dislocated after the catastrophic eruption and earthquake of 186 AD, which most likely caused it to shift.
Yesterday, our archaeologist dug down about half a metre below this face here, and this face was still going down, and we used a steel probe to feel underneath, and we were striking rock underneath that. So that gives an indication that at least there's something further down again. And the rocks themselves bend in a sort of a semicircle around, and it may be the shape of some sort of structure.
At the bottom of one part of the structure, there were perfectly smooth rock surfaces with square edges.
We were standing on a piece of rock face which was so smooth we couldn't believe our eyes. It was just like it was poured concrete. And I think that speaks for itself. Square-edged, everything.
Curiously, the same thing was discovered in another section of the site. In one area, the discovery of another floor surface revealed an intriguing characteristic. Upon tapping, the floor emitted a hollow sound, suggesting it might not be a floor at all. Instead, this could indicate the presence of a roof concealing an underlying chamber.
If you, just for the sake of the camera, just get your spade and run the spade across the top of that. Now, that just sounds like you would be running a spade down a concrete slab. And that to me is bloody like concrete. That's just amazing.
In fact, in many areas around the site, probes were able to hit solid rock beneath the earth.
Well, we were probing through an area here. It's obviously going down through the pumice a certain distance, and bang, it hits a perfectly level area where it sends a vibration back up through the rod and makes a kind of a humming sound as we hit something very solid.
And what does the sound of wood, what does wood sound like?
See, it's like a thud, but it doesn't have the dink. See, and I'm not very deep. See, look at that. See, that's hitting root. If I just go here, hear the difference?
Yep.
Considering the area around the Kaimanawa Wall is relatively flat, some people suggested that the evenly sloped steep mound behind the wall could be hiding an enormous pyramidal structure. On one side of the hill, more stone blocks are visible. These blocks, similar in appearance to those on the wall, display a high degree of symmetry and descend the hill with precise alignment. Remarkably, the angle at which these stones are arranged mirrors the overall incline of the hill itself. And right next to this piece, there's another small piece of exposed stone blocks with the same degree of incline. A short distance away, a third piece has been unearthed, exhibiting the same precise symmetry and alignment as previously observed. Additionally, this piece features the beveled edges seen on the main structure, with the bevel's angle being pretty much identical to other stones. This consistency raises questions about the site's true nature. Could it be something far more complex than a mere stone wall? Might it actually be an ancient pyramid, akin to those discovered in America? It's worth noting that most of the American pyramids were initially indistinguishable from natural landscapes due to being completely enveloped in soil and vegetation. Take, for example, the pyramids at Teotihuacan, which resembled ordinary hills with no stones visible on the surface. Similarly, the temple pyramid at Tikal revealed only a small portion of its structure, much like what we observed in New Zealand with the Kaimanawa Wall. In 2019, research was published on the Tureho New Zealand channel, where they showed a remarkable discovery with the use of ground-penetrating radar. As they show in this picture, 2 or 3 meters below the white tape, which is almost 10 feet, the ground-penetrating radar showed an identical pattern as the pattern corresponding to the wall on the surface. This means that below the ground, the structure continued in the same exact pattern of construction with more massive ignimbrite blocks stacked together. Additionally, the video showed some very intriguing rock incisions on the surface of a hard rhyolite rock. All of this information, taken together, suggests that the structure was something much more sophisticated than a mere wall. But what? It's interesting to note that volcanic rocks, especially those high in silica content, are typically found in areas with geological faults and are associated with strong magnetic fields. The presence of water flowing across such stones can generate electric currents, leveraging the silica's properties, similar to its use in computing for information storage and conduction. The site's location on a fault line, known for strong magnetic and telluric energies, led many to theorize that the structure could have served as some sort of energy container, harnessing the Earth's natural forces. But if all of this is true, why hasn't the site been properly excavated? Despite all findings, the government of New Zealand refused the notion that the structure is the work of an advanced ancient civilization that settled in New Zealand long before the Maori. In fact, the government actually forbade any archaeological excavations on the site, as you can see on the sign placed before the structure. The official stance of the authorities is that the site is nothing more than a natural formation, a byproduct of volcanic activity that occurred long ago. But how could they be so sure without conducting a proper excavation? Moreover, why would they forbid others from doing any archaeological work on the site? Actually, they have a very good reason for doing so. They refuse the notion that the site is built by an advanced civilization simply because that is the politically correct thing to do. New Zealand, like many countries, grapples with the challenges of reconciling its colonial past with the rights, traditions, and histories of its indigenous people, in this case, the Maori. The arrival of Europeans in the 18th century marked the beginning of a period of significant change, conflict, and cultural exchange, the effects of which are still felt today. In New Zealand, the indigenous Maori people are organized into various tribes and sub-tribes. The exact number of tribes can vary depending on how one defines and recognizes them, but there are over 100 of them in New Zealand. Each tribe has its own social and political structure, history, and connection to specific regions of the country. A significant process has been underway in New Zealand for several decades to address historical grievances and recognize the rights of Maori tribes over their lands. This process is facilitated through the Waitangi Tribunal, which was established in 1975 to investigate and make recommendations on claims brought by Maori relating to actions or omissions by the Crown that breached the promises made in the Treaty of Waitangi, signed in 1840. Many tribes have engaged in this process and have had settlements reached with the New Zealand government that include formal apologies, financial compensation, and the return of certain lands to tribal control, among other forms of redress. These settlements are specific to each tribe and are based on the unique circumstances of their claims. The process of recognizing land rights and settling historical grievances is ongoing, with many tribes having completed settlements and others still in various stages of negotiation or awaiting resolution. In this context, archaeological discoveries and interpretations of historical sites can become highly sensitive issues. The way history is told, the emphasis on certain narratives over others, and the recognition of cultural sites and artifacts can all have implications for national identity, cultural heritage, and even political and legal rights. The megalithic site at Kaimanawa, given its mysterious nature and the debate over its origins, falls into a category of historical and archaeological interest that is inherently intertwined with these broader issues. Some individuals and groups have suggested that the reluctance to explore certain theories about the site's origins, particularly those that might suggest a pre-Maori human presence in New Zealand, could be influenced by political considerations, as acknowledging such a possibility might undermine the recognized status of Maori as Tangata Wenua, meaning people of the land, and disrupt the established historical narrative of New Zealand. This can cause a significant political and ethnic fracture in the country, and potentially affect land claims and government compensations to the indigenous people. Despite the official dismissal of the Kaimanawa Wall as a mere natural occurrence, the arguments and observations presented by some researchers point to a more complex and possibly intentional origin, suggesting that this structure could be more than just a coincidental formation of nature. But if the New Zealand authorities can so easily dismiss such a controversial site just to keep the status quo, does that mean that there may be other discoveries in New Zealand that can prove an ancient civilization existed here? The notion that New Zealand remained uninhabited until the arrival of the Maori around 900 years ago sounds a bit off, especially when considering the extensive human presence across the Pacific. Mainstream archaeological evidence and Aboriginal mythology suggest Australia has been settled for over 40,000 years, and even remote locations like Easter Island have a rich history of human habitation. Given this backdrop, the idea that the islands of New Zealand remained undiscovered until 900 years ago seems quite peculiar. Adding to the intrigue are stories from Maori folklore, which seem to hint at a pre-existing knowledge of New Zealand. Among these tales, we can find the very reason the tribes came to New Zealand. It was the quest for greenstone, punamu, a highly valued nephrite jade found in the South Island. The lore raises compelling questions. If New Zealand was truly untouched and unknown, how did early Maori or their Polynesian ancestors come to know of the existence and location of its greenstone? This narrative suggests that knowledge of New Zealand and its resources might have existed before its widely recognized discovery and settlement, sparking curiosity and speculation about the island's history and the extent of ancient exploration. But the real question is, was there a civilization living in New Zealand in these ancient times? In 1972, a remarkable discovery atop a hill in Silverdale, New Zealand, piqued the interest of those fascinated by the country's ancient past. Here, buried under layers of humus accumulated over centuries, lay a series of mysterious stone boulders. These boulders had lain undisturbed, hidden under the earth, for potentially a couple of thousand years. What made the find particularly intriguing was the nature and placement of these boulders. Approximately 10 to 12 of them were located at the peak of a clay hill in Silverdale, a setting where coning boulders could not naturally occur due to the geological composition of the area. This raised immediate questions about their origins, as such boulders typically form over millions of years in sea sediments, starting as small shells that become coated with layers of sand and lime. Their presence on a clay hill, far from their natural incubation environment, suggested a deliberate act. Ancient people, at some point in history, had transported these markers to the hilltop as part of an overland alignment system. Another interesting find was made after the relocation of these massive boulders in 1992 due to the construction of a motorway. It was during this process that features were discovered on the boulders, features unmistakably made by human hands. This was a significant revelation. Further investigations revealed that these boulders lay beneath a layer of tephra ash from the 186 AD eruption of Mount Taupo, indicating that the human-made modifications predated this event. This timeline places the alterations to the boulders over 1,000 years before the recognized arrival of the Maori in New Zealand, suggesting a much older, previously unknown chapter of human activity in the region. Among the modifications are beautifully carved bowls, known as bullon stones in other parts of the world, particularly Ireland, where they are part of ancient blessing and cursing altars. These bowls were meticulously chipped and carved by hand, a process distinct from any mechanical drilling or boring. Another incredible discovery is the Kaimanawa rock carvings, which were tucked away in the vast expanses of the Kaimanawa Forest, one of the largest plantation forests in the world. Many believe these carvings offer a tantalizing glimpse into an ancient past that may predate known Maori settlements. The exact origins of the Kaimanawa rock carvings remain a topic of debate among historians and archaeologists. The detailed craftsmanship evident in the carvings suggests a sophisticated understanding of art and symbolism, raising the possibility that they could be the work of an unknown ancient civilization that inhabited New Zealand's shores long before the arrival of the Maori people. The carvings themselves depict a variety of figures and motifs, some of which bear resemblance to the known iconography of Polynesian cultures, while others seem entirely unique, belonging to no known historical or cultural narrative. Supporting the theory of an unknown ancient civilization are the mysteries surrounding the techniques used to create the carvings. The precision and depth of the carving suggest the use of tools and methods not traditionally associated with the early inhabitants of New Zealand. In the Waipoua Forest in Northland, there's another site believed to be part of a pre-Maori civilization, where the ruins of ancient stone structures were found. These ruins had been noted and written about by early Europeans, who wondered about the stone builders who had lived there. The only thing left to the public are these photos taken on the 11th of November 2000. After a 3-year government investigation and excavation, all findings, including stone structures, artifacts, and everything else of note, were sent away to remain hidden under a 75-year restriction, which will last until 2063. At the end of the archaeological excavations, all public access to the area was denied. Visitors wanting to see the stone artifacts were turned away, and access requests by historians and archaeologists were denied, with the reasons given being that the area had been declared tapu and that it was under a Waitangi Treaty claim. From the photos we have, we can see prominent ancient walls emerging distinctly above the layer of humus. Additionally, there are sequences of boundary stones demarcating specific sections. These stones encircle a central pile of stones, which likely was once a beehive house, a type of rudimentary dwelling that has since collapsed into a disorganized heap. This method of constructing stone dome shelters was widely used in megalithic Great Britain and continental Europe, and it appears that New Zealand's pre-Maori stone people adopted the same technique for their homes. Moreover, numerous boulders bearing deep groove marks, likely made using stone tools, can be found throughout the forest. These grooves may have been created during the sharpening and shaping of adzes. Such boulders are plentiful and could possibly serve as some kind of pictorial representation. The significant wear on these carved surfaces suggests they are of considerable antiquity. It's likely that these structures were built thousands of years ago, when the Waipoua Forest was not yet a forest, but a fertile ground. The Māori themselves state that they don't know who built this ancient stone city. The Waipoua Forest Stone City should be a national treasure, if not a worldwide historic place. Yet not only is it being ignored and not protected, but its destruction is actually being encouraged. This leads to the conclusion that the site could be evidence of a prehistoric civilization, which explains why the New Zealand government wants to avoid its existence being acknowledged by the public or the world. There are many other sites all across New Zealand, like the Puketapu Hill and the Waitaha Valley, which have precise stone markings that could serve as an ancient astronomical observatory site, or the Tapapakanga Park, which many feel is another collapsed ancient settlement with beehive-styled stone houses. While the efforts to respect indigenous claims are undeniably crucial, they have, in this instance, led to a paradox where the potential knowledge of New Zealand's ancient past remains ensconced in shadows. This approach not only stifles academic freedom but also deprives the public and the global community of understanding a possibly transformative chapter in human history. This suppressed chapter could contribute significantly to our understanding of human migration patterns, architectural practices, and societal structures in the prehistoric Pacific. The issue at heart is not merely about access to information, but about acknowledging and integrating the full spectrum of New Zealand's heritage into its national identity and history. The anticipation grows for a more inclusive and comprehensive narrative that honors both New Zealand's indigenous cultures and its mysterious ancient predecessors. Thank you for watching. If you want to learn more about another megalithic and advanced ancient complex in the Pacific, you can watch our documentary on Nan Madol. The link is in the top pinned comment.